Good afternoon. It's 4:30 in Brussels, 5:30 in Sharm-el-Sheikh. Good afternoon and heartily welcome to this side event in the EU's commission, in the European Union's virtual side events pavilion. And the event now is on digitalization for sustainability, accelerating our sustainability agenda and the clean energy transition. Today we will have 1 hour together. We will have 2 introductory speeches of about 6 minutes each, and then we have a panel discussion with a distinctive panel. So with this introduction, before we open the floor for the first speakers, I would like to inform you that the objective is to have an interactive session. So the discussion would live from your questions, and to submit the questions to us, please use Slido. You see the Slido link or the QR code on the website. So please submit your questions. And with this introductory words, I would like to introduce the first 2 keynote speakers. And the first speaker would be Paula Pinho, my director from the European Commission. She is director in the Commission's Directorate General for Energy, the director for Just Transition, Consumers, Energy Efficiency and Innovation. And she will give us a few her keynotes focusing on an action plan on digitalization that was just produced under her leadership. And followed this, I would give the floor to Dirk Messner from the European Environment Agency. And Professor Dirk Messner is since 2020. He's the director of the Umweltbundesamt, the German Environment Agency. He's also professor, and he was director of the United Nations University for several years, and is very well known in the area of digitalization and socio-ecological transformation. With this introductory words to my first speakers, I would give the floor to Paula.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carsten, and what a pleasure to be here with this very distinguished panel members. A real honor for me to be here to address you all on this important topic. Now, in the European Union, we are on a path to decarbonize the energy system. We have set ourselves very concrete targets. We've said by 2030, we need to reduce by 55% our greenhouse gas emissions. And that sets us in a really pretty ambitious path. And one thing is absolutely clear. For that to become a reality, we need to digitalize. We need to make the most of the digitalization of the energy system. In the meantime, and this was definitely not in the plan, we are exposed to the consequences of a terrible war in Ukraine, which has led, among many other things, to very high energy prices. And with this, it became very clear that we need to even accelerate, to put on a much faster pace our decarbonization of the energy system. So the direction has not changed, the objectives have not changed, but clearly the pace at which we will have to do it definitely changed, and we will need to accelerate it. So what do we need to do? And this applies to the EU, but it also applies globally to everyone who wants to make the most of a sustainable energy system. So we will need to change the way in which we produce, in which we consume energy, but also the way in which we make use of the energy infrastructure. So in terms of the way we produce energy, we can, thanks to digitalization, we can make the most of the energy system by decentralizing the way we produce electricity. Then we need clearly to change the way in which we consume energy, and there every single one of us has a role to play. If we want to make use of our leverage as consumers, we need to make best use of demand response. If we have the smart appliances at home, but also at industrial level, those can bring a crucial change in managing our energy bills and preserving our networks secure. Through digital tools, consumers can, for instance, see in real time the sources of energy and the times of the day when energy is less expensive. If there is too much electricity in the grid, the consumer can decide, for instance, that this is the right moment to activate the washing machine. And therefore, this allows us really to make informed choices on the best moment and the how and the when to consume, and therefore to take control of the energy consumption, and therefore also to act on the energy bills, something which is so important at this point in time. So making best use of flexibility on the energy supply, on the demand side, through digitalization is increasingly important for the energy system to limit both emissions, but also to limit the prices. In fact, we've estimated that within the EU, if we make best use of demand flexibility, there could be a potential reduction of costs for consumers of more than 71 billion euro per year in terms of electricity consumption and the related costs. And at the same time, there could be a reduction of over 37.5 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions yearly. So really huge, immense, the potential that can be seized. But it's also, as I said, not just about the way we produce energy, the way we consume, it's also the way in which we use the energy infrastructure. And for that, we need to rely on data access and on exchange of data and the digital technologies. And here again, we can seize very important savings in terms of energy consumption. So by digitalizing the energy system, we can at the same time green the energy grid and also generate savings, which is and should really be a no regret option as we speak these days. So what has the EU and the European Commission done in order to accelerate this path? Among many other measures, only recently we have put forward the digitalization of the energy. Here we're looking at the global context and the said clear need also internationally for a global governance. Within the EU, we're looking at this twin energy and digital transition. And as said, through this action plan, we've identified what are the measures across the energy system that we would need to put into place. And if we look at those 5 areas, first, data exchange. We need to share data across the energy value chain, coordinate exchanges to strengthen the interoperability and link these data with other sectors. This interoperability, this exchange of data will contribute to the creation of innovative services, and it will at the same time, by creating new business potential, unlock private investments that can support this digital transition, the energy and the digital twin transition. So we need to support data exchange in the energy sector as a matter of priority to make this happen. Second pillar, we need to foster investments in smarter and more digitalized systems. Now, the decentralization of the energy generation, the millions of connected smart appliances, heat pumps, electric cars, will transform the last meters in the distribution grid into the first meters. And operators would need to invest in monitoring and control capabilities. And let me just give you an example of where the options are. If you imagine a city, let's imagine a big city in Europe, for instance, but it could be anywhere in the world. And we're thinking of 9% of the vehicles circulating in that city will be electric vehicles. We can approach it in two ways. Either we can go for an investment of about 20 million euro to reinforce the grid, to cater for the increased demand of electricity brought by this share of electric cars, 20 million euro. Or we can say, what if we invest in smart charging to decrease the simultaneous demand of electricity? And there we're talking about 2 million euro. So the choice should be very clear between the 20 million in reinforcing the grid or the 2 million if we go for a smart charging system in a city, just to give you an example. So smarter grids are really the backbone of the digitalization of the energy system. And third pillar, we cannot achieve this digitalization and we cannot seize the potential of these of this ambition without the support of the consumers. Citizens need to be the ones who support it, who embrace it. This is absolutely crucial because the best policy will not succeed if we cannot bring along our citizens, and this applies to anywhere where we find ourselves in the world. And here, with the digitalization in particular, we will need to pay very careful attention not to leave anyone behind. So we cannot afford to have socially disadvantaged consumers among our fellow citizens who cannot embrace because they are discriminated because they don't have the necessary skills. So clearly, we will need to pay special attention to the issues of energy poverty and to the issues of digital divide. Fourth pillar, cybersecurity and data protection. And so far we've been speaking about the opportunities that digitalization brings. But of course we cannot be blind to the challenges that digitalization also brings with it. And the challenges are, for instance, cybersecurity, because of course the more we electrify, the more the attack surface of a given system increases as we transition from a mainly centralized to a more and more decentralized energy system. So we need to be aware of this, tackle it, address these concerns, address this challenge in terms of our exposure to possible cybersecurity threats. And last pillar of our action plan is really, and is part of the challenges, we need to tackle the growing energy consumption and the environmental impact of the ICT systems. We know that the ICT sector brings with it also a big consumption of energy. In fact, it's on par with the one of the aviation industry, to give you an idea. And it's growing at a very, very fast pace. Be it talking about data centers, speaking about communication networks, we really need to manage the consumption of these devices, whether we're speaking about electronic displays, whether we're talking about data centers. And here, within the EU, we're looking at eco-design requirements for a large number of consumer electronics and ICT products, which will help us have a more efficient energy consumption in these displays. We're looking also at the energy consumption of data centers, for instance, and really in an effort to bring down the consumption of these centers. So, as a conclusion, it is clear that digitalization opens the way to accelerate the uptake of key technologies for the clean energy and climate transition. Here, data sharing, data access is absolutely key. We are looking into new ways to addressing the rise of emissions from the ICT and from the digital sector. And here, at this COP, 27 and speaking to all of you listening now, I'd like to really make a plea for us to deliver on a truly sustainable digitalization of the energy system. If we are meaning it globally, then we will need a very, very close cooperation of all communities, climate communities, energy communities, and the digital communities, and basically of all of us together. And this is why we really look forward in the EU to work with all of you on the green and the digital transition at international level, because the challenges we're facing go far beyond the EU, are international, and we're very keen on cooperating with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you for this introductory words. I think you nicely highlighted the link between European activities, but also on the international dimension. And with opening this, I would like to pass on the floor to Dirk Messner as our second keynote speaker, and he would now complement this. Dirk, the floor is yours.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much, Carsten. I have an echo here. Now it's better, I think. Great. I also brought some slides. Here we are. Okay. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking in the name of the Umweltbundesamt, the German Environment Agency, and at the same time in the name of the Coalition for Digital Environmental Sustainability, CODES, which is a network of organizations working towards exactly, Paula, what you said, the twin transition between sustainability and climate neutrality on the one hand side and digitalization on the other hand side, and how to bring these two mega trends and two transformations and transitions together. And in this network, we are working with the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, with UNDP, with Future Earth, the International Science Council, and others to move into this direction. And what I wanted to start with before I dive into the energy sector and then combine this with digitalization is, at this slide you see where we currently stand, and we are actually really in trouble. I have been coming back from Sharm-el-Sheikh on Sunday, so I came back to Berlin last night, and this is where we stand, right? I mean, on the left-hand side, this is the UNEP GAP report. We are on a 2.6 to 3 or maybe even more degrees global warming for the next decades to come. So far away from our goals, actually. In the middle, you see that we have to increase the share of electric vehicles and passenger car sales 5 times. We have to expand zero carbon sources in electricity generation 6 times faster during the next decades from now on than in the past. We have to move out of coal 6 times faster than we did during the last decade. So we need to move into I would call this a factor 5 or factor 6 world. And the question is, are these digital technologies the disruption we have been looking for? Paula, this is what you also talked about, right? So when you look at the next slide, I have been driving into the European Action Plan on Digitalization in the energy system. And what I would like to start with is a very simple observation. Paula, I'm very happy that the European Union now is telling this twin transition as one narrative. Amandeep, we met a few weeks ago in New York, and we said it's still hard in many sectors to bring these two dynamics together systematically. Digitalization on the one hand side, sustainability on the other hand side. Paola, you did exactly that. And in the action plan, you are trying to integrate the digital narrative, the digital pathways into the energy transition. And the 3 things which I wanted to highlight here, you can see in this diagram, the main pillars which I identified in the action plan itself. No? And what I wanted to comment here is mainly the following. The first one is that if you look at this diagram, my first point would be digitalization is not only one of the 10 elements which you can see here. As the digital sector, the digital economy is not a sector. No? Digitalization is impacting all other economic sectors. And in this diagram, in the field of energy, no? Digitalization is actually, this is my second observation, it is a driver of many of the other elements of the overall energy strategy. And I'm completely aligned here with what Paola said. I mean, if you look at sector integration, digitalization can help here. If you look at energy efficiency, digitalization, as Paola mentioned, is a driver of change. If you look at access to consumer information, again, digitalization. If you look at systems integration and energy flows, monitoring them and governing them and steering them, again, digitalization is the force to do so. And therefore, my overall message, looking at the interaction between digitalization on the one hand side and the energy transition on the other hand side, is the main challenge now is to understand and then manage the cross-cutting functions and possibilities of digital innovations across the whole energy system and across these different elements of the European Action Plan on the energy system transformation. So this is my first look at that. No? When you move to the third slide, I have a broader perspective. I would like to look at the technologies which we call digital tools, digital innovation technologies, in the middle of this diagram. And what you can see is that we are talking about a bundle of technologies. It's about AI, machine learning, digital twins, satellites, blockchain, visualization tools, and so forth. So we are having in front of us a bundle of technologies. On the left-hand side, what I did is to try to figure out the main characteristics of digital innovations and digital tools. When you look through these different capabilities and characteristics, my argument is that all these characteristics are very helpful and maybe leverage points to bringing our sustainability transformations and climate neutrality transformations forward. Mapping, integrating, analyzing, optimizing, predict, simulate, sense, connect, and steer. All of this is important for many green economy transformations, but specifically also, of course, for the energy sector. If you look at simulation, for example, this is what Paula talked about. Simulation helps us to get smart grids really done. You know? Or if you look at mapping, integrating, analyzing, and visualizing data, this helps us overall to manage complex economic systems, also complex energy systems. So these capabilities, this is the overall message of digital innovations, are compatible with our sustainability transformations and climate neutrality objectives. And therefore, I would argue that these technologies really help us, compared with former technologies, to get our transformation towards sustainability much better done than without these technologies. And this is very important to state. But of course, and this is then the last slide, there are also, as Paola said, and I can build on her. Could you give me the last slide, please? Yeah. And I would like to emphasize what Paola already also talked about. We see all these opportunities which I talked about, the importance as a cross-cutting force of transformation in the energy sector, looking at digital innovations and digital tools. We also see that there are obviously, related to digitalization, challenges, risks, and pitfalls. So there is no automatism between digitalizing everything and becoming more sustainable and climate neutral. We have to govern that. No? And therefore, we have to understand and identify the major problems and pitfalls. And I would like to only emphasize two of these problems which are directly related to the energy field. And the overall message is that it's too simple to only reflect about technological fixes. No? We have to think about technological innovation and governance towards our common goal, which is sustainability and climate neutrality. So two factors which are risky, looking at digital dynamics of innovation in the energy sector from a sustainability perspective. The first point is very easy to understand. Paola, I think you also mentioned this. Many digital innovations, hardware, software, data centers, are themselves highly energy and also resource intensive. So if we don't get IT greened, if we don't start greening IT infrastructures and decarbonizing infrastructures per se, we will not be able to use digitalization as a main driver of transformation of our energy systems towards climate neutrality. And there's a lot of room for improvement to greening IT in the energy sector. Because in all our European countries, and many of our European countries, we are still at the very beginning. My agency, the German Environmental Agency, we are focusing on that. We are trying to define energy standards for data centers. Before we do so, we need transparency in the data center sector because we do not have the right numbers. So a lot of things to do when it comes to greening the IT sector itself to help making digitalization a driver of sustainability transformations. The last point I wanted to finish with also looks at the consumer side. Paola, I'm happy that you also mentioned that you did not only look at the supply side, but also the demand side. And here it is important to state that digitalization can, for example, improve energy efficiency. Paola talked about that, I talked about that, but this can be overcompensated by exponential consumption growth. I will only give one example, which is coming from the digital sector: autonomous driving, self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are very energy intensive until now. So on the one hand side, digitalization can help us to improve the energy efficiency. On the other hand side, it can drive unsustainable consumption. This is the rebound effect, right? And this is what I wanted to finish with. When we look at the digitalization sector as a driver of change towards sustainability, we at CODES, we distinguish three different shifts which we need to bring together. The first one is aligning the narratives of the sustainability transformations on the one hand side and the digital transition on the other hand side. Paola did exactly that, presenting the European Union Digital Energy Transformation Action Plan. The second element is understanding the risks and pitfalls and trying to avoid those. This is shift number 2. And the last shift is then how to bring together the forces of digitalization to improve sustainability transformations. This is mobilizing and leveraging innovations of the digital sector for our common goals, which is climate neutrality on the one hand side and the SDGs on the other hand side. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dirk, for this introductory remarks and also for linking the work of the we do in the Commission very much with these global challenges. And I think when we look back to the last 30 years of climate action, the transition of the energy sector was very much in the forefront. And now we see that also digitalization could act as an enabler. I think we've also heard about the problems that might be on the horizon if we have an ungoverned process of digitalization, because not everything automatically leads to support also the climate and energy targets. But digitalization is a challenge, is a process. I think you highlighted some of the points. With this opening the floor, I would like Amandeep on the floor to comment on it. Amandeep, just to introduce him, is a UN envoy on technology. He has a background on AI, and he was just appointed in I think it was July 2020 to work also on linking technology, but also digitalization technologies towards the UN agenda. I think what we've seen in Paula's, but also in Dirk's intervention, is that digitalization is a cross-cutting element. It enables and it also across different conventions, UN bodies, and also local and international parts. So, Amandeep, in this context, where would you see also the opportunities, but also the challenges of the digitalization process from an energy and climate context?
Thank you very much, and thank you to the organizers for the invitation to share some thoughts from the perspective of the UN Secretariat in New York. I'm Amandeep Gill, Under Secretary General and UN Secretary General's Tech Envoy. And my responsibility as the focal point on digital cooperation issues extends, on the one hand, to governance issues, such as the forthcoming Global Digital Compact, where we seek to address the issues of harm and misuse of these technologies, their human rights implications, for example. But also the opportunity side, where digital technologies can accelerate progress on the SDGs across a number of areas: agriculture and food security, health, education, the humanitarian side, and of course the green transition. In this regard, the challenges have been well laid out by the previous speakers. The challenge of moving to a decentralized and data-driven energy production, energy supply, and energy consumption system, The challenge also of nudging the behavior of customers and citizens digitally. So it's not only action at the level of governments and the private sector, we also need to engage citizens and communities. By shifting patterns of consumption, they can make a huge difference. It was in this context the UN Secretary General co-launched the LIFE initiative with Prime Minister Modi, an event attended by many leaders from the European Union. We must also look at the role that very targeted initiatives with data can play. For instance, consumption in key manufacturing sectors such as steel making or automobile manufacturing. If we bring data to every aspect of the manufacturing process, every aspect of the life cycle use of materials, there is a big shift that can be facilitated. The aviation sector was mentioned, but I think in terms of e-waste, we also need to look at some other examples. The fertilizer industry, the plastics industry. We were not, when these things were rolled out, we were not aware of the long-term consequences. We need to be very careful about the long-term consequences of e-waste and also the move to AI. Having worked in the AI space for the last 3 years, sometimes training a single AI model can consume as much energy as 5 cars need over their life cycle. So we need more collaborative approaches to AI. There's no use reinventing the wheel 20 places across the globe. The world needs to work together on AI-driven solutions. The European Union, China, India, US, others, on some of these global issues, they need to come together to build data and AI commons so that we don't keep repeating the same kind of training of AI models all over the planet. Finally, I think we need new approaches to collaboration. Within the EU, I think there is a welcome push on digital interoperability, Gaia-X, many other initiatives, but I think we need a global approach. EU alone, EU is an important actor, but EU alone will not be able to drive the global conversation. We need to leverage platforms such as the United Nations, the upcoming Global Digital Compact, to bring more players, particularly from the Global South, into this conversation. If in Africa and Southern Asia, we do not align the green transition, the energy transition, manufacturing as per the fourth industrial revolution priorities, and the digital transition, then we are going to create massive problems. So there's need to invest in data-related capacity, bridging the digital divide, and bringing wise counsel to bear on the decisions of governments as they put together their strategies for leveraging the digital transformation. Let me just conclude by saying that we are happy to partner with CODIS and many other multi-stakeholder coalitions as part of the vision of a digital commons architecture articulated in the UN Secretary General's high-level panel on digital cooperation report of June 2019. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this word, and also thank you to the audience for the first questions. Before we come back to them, I see a lot of the questions also link, Amandeep, the points you highlighted with some of the practical needs we see in countries. With this, I would like to introduce Rose Mirbaza, the director of the Climate Technology Center and Network, who links a bit of the global context we often discuss in the climate context with practical needs coming from developing countries, on technology needs, on requests on countries. And Rose, with this background, how would you see, also with your experience you get from the country requests, the opportunities and challenges for digitalization in your context? And welcome to this.
Thank you very much. I would like to start by saying that today being Gender Day at the core, I want to begin by recognizing the fact that, in fact, digital technologies, green and digital technologies are not gender neutral. And therefore, women commonly face higher risks and burdens from the impacts of climate change and overall environmental degradation, and therefore their needs must be really effectively and equitably taken into account in all green and digital solutions. But I also know from our experience that women bring perspectives and innovations in identifying implementation solutions, especially in the digitization space, because in fact, as I speak to you now, working with the Women and Gender Constituency of the UNFCCC, we are hosting a large delegation of women and celebrating some of the innovations for climate change adaptation and mitigation from global women in the South, and a lot of these are digital. But to go back a little bit to what the CTCN does, as the implementation arm of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, we do quite a lot of work supporting developing countries on digitization. In fact, at this point, it's one of the highest areas of request. And we see a lot of potential in what digital technologies can offer in providing solutions, technological-based solutions for developing countries. And I'll just quickly give you some of the examples of the support we've given to some of the countries to support them in their requests, especially in relation to integrating of renewable energy to the electricity grid, which is really one of the highest areas of demand in many of the developing countries and emerging economies we work with. And the first example I want to give is the work we've done in Cambodia, where we helped them analyze the potential for their renewable energy grid integration. And here, what we did is just bring to them the possibilities based on experiences of other countries of how this grid integration would happen. And we provided them an energy management system that allowed the hybrid use of their grid. And we used this using machine learning and the Internet of Things. We also did work with them to promote a blockchain-based smart contracting system to enable this hybrid renewable energy grid system. And we established with them artificial neural networks to support their renewable energy forecasting. So these are things we are doing in real life with countries to help them with their energy transition. From the technical assistance in the smaller island developing countries, a lot of the support they are requesting for digital applications relate to low emission carbon transport. And what we see therefore in supporting the small island developing states is a high request for electric mobility, such as the use of, they want support for things such as the use of real world data to stimulate electric mobility in their countries. They want support for use of artificial intelligence in electromobility, fleet optimization. These are actual requests we are getting from countries. And again, in these small island developing countries, they are looking for vehicle to grid technology with the implementation of e-vehicles. And they want support for the establishment of an adequate e-vehicle system that is supported by a robust infrastructure. So there are a lot of requests coming to us. Again, within the realm of digitization, there is a lot of curiosity from the developing countries on the digital applications related to blockchain technologies. And so for the CTCN, we have initiated a capacity building program where we are looking at emerging digital technologies for climate action. And under this program, we are looking at digital blockchain applications for the agriculture sector and for the energy sector, and a few other sectors that countries are interested in. They are also requesting information and support on how they can use this to meet their obligations under Article 6 on the transparency requirements in the Paris Agreement. So there are a lot of practical applications for which countries are requesting support from the CTCN. And to give you a sense of the magnitude of the requests we've received, since the inception of the CTCN, we have received requests from over 109 developing countries. And the technology solutions they request vary, but in total there are over 350 technology solutions that they are inquiring about or for which they seek support. And as I said, digital solutions and including the applications of digital applications relating to blockchain are one of the highest areas of demand, especially in the area of e-mobility and energy, but also increasingly in the agricultural sector. So it is therefore no surprise that in Glasgow, when CTCN was asked by the member states to develop a new program of work, one of the key enablers that the member states have asked us to use in supporting them in the next 5 years, 2023 to 2027, they want us to support them on digitization and the development of their national systems of innovation to drive transformation around the 5 systems transformation that are most impactful on climate and nature as identified in the IPCC. So going forward, a lot of the work that we are going to do, enabling transfer of technologies for developing countries across the globe are going to be structured around digitization, promotion of innovation by promoting systems of national innovation in developing countries, and gender is going to be critical to that. So thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Can I already come back to you with one question that was raised by the audience? It's maybe looking at the country request on your program of work. Maybe you have some insights on this. The question was related to the role of digitalization in countries with little or no digital infrastructure. So often we hear examples, I think also from East Africa, about systems where you can use a mobile system to leapfrog certain technology deficits that are then the infrastructure. But maybe you can see what is the interaction between digitalization as a process and the level of digital infrastructure available in a country. Rose, you want to come back in?
Thank you. So the level of digitalization in many of the countries we service really is uneven and quite low. I will use some statistics because this is an Africa COP, just to give you a sense of, because this is an Africa COP and today is Gender Day. So in Africa alone, we are told by the International Communication Union that there is a very huge digital gap, but especially between the genders. They tell us only 18% of women have access to the internet compared to 25% of men. And that women's digital participation as end users and developers is at a mere 30% of content creation, or as coders or as entrepreneurs. And so what we see therefore is that this is a real challenge in an era where we are trying to promote sustainable development using digital technologies and the real potential they offer for leapfrogging, especially in off-grid renewable energy solutions. And so one of the things I think that Paola talked about was the whole issue of a just renewable transition that makes sure we don't leave anyone behind. And I think that's where the role of the special envoy becomes really important. How do we do that? So that is the first response I would give in terms of challenge. And then, of course, the other challenge is access to energy. As you know, still close to 700 or over 750 million people still don't have access to energy. It's impossible to digitize in countries or communities where there's absolutely no access to energy. So that also becomes a challenge, and that's why our work is complementary. We support the rollout of these digital technologies, but also we extensively promote access to energy, especially renewable energy, using these same digital solutions.
Thank you, Rose. Looking also on the interventions of the previous speakers, maybe coming back to Paula, and also because some of the one of the other questions that we received is about examples. So maybe you have some examples. You already highlighted some of the charging examples, but if you have some other examples from a European perspective, it could also be relevant for the international partners.
Yes, thank you, Carsten, and thank you for the questions. Well, one technology is for instance, the smart meters. And as we now go into a winter in the EU, which can become very challenging, and where we are all asked to reduce our energy consumption, smart meters are absolutely key. So not everybody has a smart meter. We're far from that in the EU, but it's clear that such a device will help consumers really determine when is the best moment to consume energy, because very often we simply don't know. We are passive consumers. We have no idea, is there, how much electricity is there in the grid? Is there really, the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, and is there an excess of electricity in the grid, which allows me to consume under very interesting circumstances in terms of what it will cost me, but also in terms even of energy security. So for instance, this is one very obvious example. But then we also have other examples, not just on the demand side, but really on the supply side, which enable a whole energy system to be much more efficient in terms of where does which type of energy go at a given moment in time, and which are increasingly being embedded already in the generation of electricity and in the distribution of electricity. So several technologies which can really help us make the best of digitalization, and which help us, as I was saying at the very beginning, to produce, consume, but also distribute electricity in the most cost-efficient way.
Thank you. Dirk, would you like to comment on the previous speakers, or particularly on the last questions with examples, and also on how to help other countries to leapfrog when the infrastructure is not really on the same level?
Yeah, maybe one example from the German context, and one comment on what Rose said regarding leapfrogging capabilities and digital divide. So on the concrete German example, at our agency, we currently are developing what we might be called a digital twin for understanding better the potentials of wind energy in Germany. We are bringing all the data about wind flows into this digital twin. In the next step, we are going to bring in the diversity data also to understand better the implications of putting windmills in certain areas, where we might damage nature and ecosystems. So with these digital twin on wind energy in Germany, we try to visualize, analyze, monitor, and then better govern our investments in windmills and wind energy. This is a very concrete example. Digital tools, obviously, digital twins play a crucial role. Regarding the discussion which, Rose, you emphasized, I would say, or I would add 2 points. The first point, I would like to emphasize and to restate what Rose mentioned. There are many digital solutions which are very compatible with the demand of poorer countries, or even energy poor countries. Rose, you mentioned that now the off-grid solutions for energy productions are much cheaper than large grid constructions and infrastructures which we had beforehand. So there are many examples in this regard. The question is how to finance that, obviously. But this kind of technologies are compatible with solutions which we are looking for. What makes me more concerned is that if you look at research and development investments into AI, digitalization, machine learning, blockchain, the overall part of this kind of future-oriented scientific knowledge in the digital field is being done in the US, in China, and in Europe, and very little still in developing countries. So the digital divide issue goes far beyond access to digital infrastructures. It is also about the knowledge which is available to understand these innovations, therefore also to understand how they could be used and how the risks we all talked about could be avoided So in this field, research and development, Rose, you are working in this field. This is something which concerns me a lot.
Thank you. Looking on this digital divide and also what we can do together, what could be done on the international level. Amandeep, maybe you want to come in also commenting on the previous speakers and maybe come up with some positive examples?
Yes, and certainly this issue of the maturity level of different countries, that's there. But I think technology can help at each and every level. We don't have to start with digital twins and AI and ML. Simple digital platforms, data-driven policy making, data-driven policy adjustments can have a profound impact in countries where the infrastructure for more sophisticated solutions is not there. So digital at all levels is probably the way to go. Where you don't have smart meters, at least tamper-proof meters, so that you can have accurate allocation of resources, the revenue flow is there, etc. The digital divide, the positive examples that I want to bring to the attention of our this panel and the participants in this discussion, you've seen in many countries of the global south a very innovative use of digital public goods. These common rails, these guardrails, including universal digital ID. So where you had no ID, you go straight to digital ID that allows hundreds of millions of people to come into the financial mainstream, into the economic mainstream, to participate in payment mechanisms like M-Pesa in Kenya or the UPI system in India, which has now surpassed in terms of transactions most of the other payment systems. So these public infrastructures, digital public infrastructures, can play a crucial role. The cost of these, if you really look at the Indian stack, the Aadhaar system, the total development cost was south of 50 million, and the rollout cost was practically $1 a person. So, these are kind of disruptive ways, positive examples of what can work in this domain. I want to emphasize what Dirk said. There are different kinds of digital divide. Dirk, we had the discussion. So there is a funnel. There is the basic connectivity divide, but then there is a divide over content. There is a divide over who generates data, who gets to use the data and build AI on top of it. And the most insidious long-term divide is around knowledge production. So who is producing the knowledge in these frontier areas like drug discovery, genomic sequencing, or even some of the environmental solutions that we are talking about. So if it's going to stay the same, that one part of the world produces the knowledge and the solution, and the other part just contributes data to those solutions, then we are going to see even more inequity than what we see today. So we need to keep an eye on this aspect as we move forward. It'll be very crucial for trust across countries. The energy transition, the just energy transition that Paula spoke about, will not happen without that essential trust between countries.
As our time also comes slowly towards an end, and we have one open question that also hints towards your last comments and the digital divide. I think there's one, I would assume that there's an agreement that we need more, not only rollout, but also more innovation in the whole digital space. And we have a question about who should finance it. And I think who finance, we should also see who benefits from it. Would you have any ideas how the different sources of financing from the EU side, but also on the international side could match? I think Rose has some ideas in her program of work what should be done. And I think there's also maybe a perspective on the Green Climate Fund and other sources. So maybe you have some ideas of potential sources of funding in the majority world or the global south. Amandeep.
Very quickly. Yeah, go ahead, Rose. I'll follow you.
Thank you. No, I was going to say that really for the magnitude of the challenge, because it's linked to climate change and trying to provide solutions for both mitigation and adaptation, there has to be multiple sources or partnerships. So for the technology mechanism of the UNFCCC, which I serve, and under the implementation arm, there's that recognition. So the servicing of the needs of the countries to deal with these challenges and use digital technologies to leapfrog come from partnerships in the multilateral processes here at COP, where developed countries in a trust fund they created to provide funding for a C2C and trust fund to enable that technology transfer. But it's not possible for that to be sufficient. So there's a recognition of importance of partnering with the private sector, especially to fund the partnerships relating to coding, content creation, and distribution, platforms for distribution of knowledge to break the knowledge divide between the North and South. And then, of course, the other one you alluded to already was the finance mechanism that was established under the same convention as ourselves, the UNFCCC. We leverage a lot of funding from the Green Climate Fund, from the Global Environment Facilities, and other funding entities under the mechanism as the Adaptation Fund, and we use them not only to enable the developing countries to access these technologies, but also promote innovation that allows them to create the adaptive technologies they need and build the resilience to the adverse impacts of climate change.
Thank you, Rose. Can I pass the floor back to Paula, maybe to comment a bit from the European perspective on funding instruments and...
Yes, thank you, Carsten. And I fully agree with Rose that we really need a multitude of financing sources and a partnership, a real public-private partnership. It will not be enough to have just public investment, and it's also in the interest of business, of industry. It brings business opportunities, it brings employment, it brings growth opportunities, and therefore we really need to bring together all possible sources of financing within the EU. We have under the research program Horizon Europe foreseen funds to really roll out digitalization, also in the developing world. But at the end of the day, it is absolutely crucial that both public and private sector will come together and really invest in what comes out as really a win-win for everyone, to make also sure that we will bridge this divide that Amandeep was referring to, and that we will not have a polarized world in which some are generating data and the other part of the world is making use of those data. We need to allow for this, for startups also in the developing world to develop, to make use, to seize the potential of digitalization. We need to support it, to kickstart, so that we really have an opportunity which is accessible to all and not just to some in the world.
Thank you. Dirk, looking on partnerships, you introduced CODES. How would you see the driving force on the international level to develop such partnerships, and also to link in the multitude of financing instruments together? So how could the different players come together?
I mean, we talked about research development now and science, no? And I would like to add to what have been said already 2 points which are of relevance from my perspective. I think a significant higher share of the research and science-based investments in the OECD world should go directly to global South partners, or to cooperation alliances and initiatives with global South partners. And this share is still very, very low, and even more so in the field of frontier technologies. So this is my first point. Investing much more in globally organized research activities. There is still room for improvement and for leapfrogging. My second point would be that looking at the data in Europe, a very high share of the research investments in our countries in the field of digital tools, digital innovation, voice recognition, face recognition, etc., is now coming from the private sector, which is good. You talked, Amandeep, I think, and Paula, about private-public partnerships. I think to get these public-private partnerships being organized on an eye level, we need significant investments from the public side. And currently in this research field, the public investments are still lagging behind. And therefore, to build these public partnerships, I would argue in favor of significant improvements in investments of public actors in this field, because we talked about the pitfalls of digitalization. We have mentioning human rights. No? We have mentioning, controlling people based on these kind of citizens, based on these kind of technologies, is now much easier than any time in our history before. No? And therefore, public sources focusing on these kind of challenges for the future of human development is something which I would highly recommend.
Thank you, Dirk. As I get signals from the background, it would be in the football terms almost the yellow card. And because our time is running up, I think we're coming towards the end. I would just briefly like the audience for quick reactions if we would come back together at COP37, and we would again discuss the energy and digitalization topic. In one sentence, what would be the main difference? And if we start in the reverse order, maybe Rose, I start with you this time. What would be the things that should be different in 10 years?
I think that in that period, we should have been able to harness the opportunity that digital technologies offer for leapfrogging to enable the almost 750 million people globally who still don't have access to energy to have access to energy, and then use that for various digital applications they need for the other sectors of their lives.
Thank you, Rose. Amandeep, would be the change you would like to see?
I think if we can hold to that 1.5 degree change to the global average temperature, that would be the key thing I like to see. And in doing so, if we can bridge the digital divide, have universal access to clean and affordable energy, I think that would be the dream scenario 10 years from now.
Thank you. Dirk?
Yeah, very similar. I also thought that to get this 1.5 to 2 degrees corridor still done, we need to halve during the next decade. So you talked about 2032, Carsten. We needed to halve global emissions. No? And if we could do so based on the digital innovations we talked about, this would be fantastic. And on the other side of the continuum, what already has been mentioned, bringing down significantly or even eliminate energy poverty, because Rose, you mentioned this, more than 1 billion people still without any success to any kind of energy. This would be my second element. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. Paula?
I want to really believe that in 10 COPs, energy access is an absolute real right to everyone, that there's no one single person in the world who has no access to energy, that we are on a path to the 1.5 increase and not a decimal more, and that indeed digitalization has been rolled out everywhere in the world based on trust. Based on trust that it will not be abused, and based on all the safeguards that will be there to make sure that consumers across the world are not reluctant to make use of a digitalized energy system.
Thank you, Paula. With these words, I would like to conclude. I would again like to thank the speakers and panelists for being available, for discussing this. I think we've touched upon a lot of important issues, maybe more than we've seen in the start, particularly on looking on the gender gap and also on the poverty aspects. But also we've seen that multi-stakeholder cooperation is quite important. I think we've demonstrated here by bringing together different players that this is possible. That maybe we can also find further forward to discuss discuss this even further. And so I hope that we see not only at COP37, but in between, and there's a lot of things to be done within the next 10 years. So thank you very much also towards the audience and for those who put questions in the chat. So thank you very much and have a good rest of the afternoon and a good rest of the COP in Sharm el-Sheikh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.